There's nothing that demotivates a motivated or a good employee like celebrating a bad employee. See value everywhere you are, in everyone.
Hello, oh my gosh, and welcome to Hello Moxie. This is a very, very, very special interview because I get to interview one of my friends who's been my friend for most of my life. We met in college. And Laura, where was the first place we met? Was it at that house?
I think so. Yeah, the weird house on the corner.
The weird house on the corner.
Yes.
And our boyfriends were mutual friends. So that's how we connected with each other. Yes. And we've been lucky enough. We've kind of like in some ways lived parallel lives, except for lately. And then you took a really drastic turn.
So did you, I could argue, but yes. Yep.
So we met in college. We ended up marrying our boyfriends mutually, and we both ended up moving to Northern Virginia for a time. And then you went to law school down in Central Virginia.
Southern, yeah.
And then you were at William and Mary, and then we were in the DC area for many years. We had kids. We both had 2 daughters born the same year that grew up together. And we've lived parallel lives. And then you decided to go off and just tour the world.
Yep.
And enjoy and live this amazing nomadic life, which is incredible. So I every day love to see all the beautiful pictures of all the places that you're visiting and seeing. It's incredible.
Thanks. I'm glad my girls have headphones in because they would have given death stares about the silver or rose-colored glasses on our travels, but it has been good.
So tell me a little bit about the rose-colored glasses. So what's the dark underbelly side of traveling like this?
Both of my girls would say packing constantly. We're living we each have 1 suitcase and 1 backpack. European airlines are very strict and very stingy on their carry-on allowances. It's, I think, 7 kgs, which is maybe 15 pounds. Just for context, the last time we flew out of Europe, all of our bags were overweight, and we had to take all the electronics out to check them, to pay to check them. And 3 computers and a tablet and iPad were over the weight limit.
Wow.
So that's been interesting. Also, I think the time zones, in part, to stay in touch with friends. Brooke is still doing school in a US based system. And so trying to adjust to the times that her classes has been interesting. We're in Dubai right now. Both of the girls have classes at 12:30 in the morning. Thankfully, they've always been night owls, as you know. So for us, it's not much of an inconvenience, but that is something to factor in for sure.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So tell me, how many countries have you traveled to now, and how long have you been traveling?
I totally should have counted that. I don't know. Brooke, do you know how many countries we've been to? She just counted yesterday, I thought. But we've been traveling since January. We left January 11th. We went to South America, and we started in Buenos Aires as our main base. So January in Buenos Aires is the high time, the hot time. Everybody leaves Buenos Aires, which is part of why we went. It's a little more accessible, but it's hot. And then we went to Iguazu Falls, met up with Ben's mom, and experienced Brazil. Then further around, yes, Harper. We went to Chile. And Peru. Yes, Brooke. 18. We went to 18 countries so far.
18 countries.
Europe, and we're currently Middle East. What?
Yeah. That's incredible. So what has inspired this? What was it that made you decide that you wanted to do this big, amazing lifestyle change for your family? Because you have kids that are both in school, high school and middle school.
Elementary.
So what was it?
Yeah.
Elementary still for Harper. So what made you because I think a lot of people would just be like, oh, I can't take my kids out of school. I got it. They're in the school system, or like from a work perspective, I can't leave work at this time of life. So I would just love to know, what was it that inspired you to take the plunge and do this?
I'll answer the school question first and then go to the life and the personal question. So with schooling, we no longer live in the DC area and can't take advantage of the amazing schools there. And across the US, school calibers vary. And we ended up in a place where the school caliber was not as high as Fairfax County. And also the principal of the school that we were zoned for didn't have very progressive views on accelerating education. So her general view, what we were experiencing is you learn the baseline state curriculum. And if you go beyond that, you're not going to have anything to learn in the next grade. And that didn't sit very well with either of us, nor did it sit well with our kids. And so Harper, the younger one, asked to be homeschooled when she was in second grade because she was saying, I'm not learning anything. And at the time, my husband had a lot of flexibility in his job, and he was able to take her to some really interesting homeschool programs in and around our community. So she was able to experience a forest school where she was outside a lot, outside during the entire term of the school, and playing with kids in a way that taught a lot of emotional regulation and problem solving. I mean, she's probably the most emotionally adjusted of all of us in the family. To be honest, she's sitting here ghosting me and says not true, but
it's because all the movies.
My older daughter was in a situation where the administration was not fantastic, and she was just kind of making herself sick and going to school. There was a lot of bullying, some really bad bullying in the system. We've heard some horror stories from some of our friends as their kids are kind of getting out of it and trying to move on. And so in 8th grade, just looking for anything we could find that might help her, we found an online school, put her in it. And after a lot of resistance, she really started to thrive. And when high school came around, she asked to go back into brick and mortar. And so she did. And after about 2 months, she came back and said, can I return to the online school? I think it was a better fit. I liked it better. And so at that point, she's flexible in her schooling. The younger one's flexible in her schooling. As you mentioned, I went to law school, spent my career as an attorney. And it's a career where it's really easy to get burned out. Very, very easy to get burned out. And my husband kept saying, we don't have to keep doing it this way. Why are we doing this? What are we working towards? If it's towards money, here are ways that we can spend things and be pretty safe. If it's to earn money, here's how I've been earning it. We can continue to do that and still be pretty safe. Is it just because you feel like you have to, or because you want to? Do you love this job? And at the time, I actually had a really amazing kind of unicorn job that I think will go to one of the last questions in the Moxie method, honestly. But I loved my team, and I loved the mission of what I was doing. And those two things I didn't want to walk away from, but the dysfunction of the entire environment was getting to the point where most of what I was doing with my team and they were doing for me was just therapy of how are we going to get through the insanity of what we're doing. And so at that point, I'm in a spot where I could probably say that I'm never going to have as good of a boss, as good of coworkers. And it's still just driving me, just wearing me down because of this corporate culture. And so I had said, probably in October, like at the end of the year, I'll quit and let's travel. And so that's what happened.
What do you think it was about what you mentioned, the corporate culture? What is it about the corporate culture that you think creates this propensity to burn out?
So a lot of things, a lot of things. There's a quote that I agree with more than most I've seen, which is there's nothing that demotivates a motivated or a good employee like celebrating a bad employee. And I think that happens a lot. There's, in most places that I've worked, kind of a feeling that if you recognize one person or a group of people for a good job, you can't re-recognize any of those people until you've recognized everyone. And so then there are those that everyone knows aren't pulling their weight, are maybe actually destructive, who are getting the same honors that these good people did. I think that can get really rough. I was in a situation where I was not only dealing with corporate culture, but also the federal government. And so I had 2 layers of bureaucracy. And the company that I was working for, I had this strong impression, tended to exist by rules rather than thought. Money would be wasted to follow a rule rather than looking at what the purpose or the point of it was. It just got to the point of I was spending, 20 to 25 hours a week dealing with the red tape of the company to get something done. And then I had 15 hours left to actually do work. But we had 60 to 70 hours of work a week that needed to be done. And that's untenable for sure.
That is so interesting. I think there's like this balance, right? Like if you're in an organization and working and trying to do, if you're in a company or you work for a government agency or wherever you may work, there is certainly a need to have structure within the organization so that there's guardrails for people and there's alignment towards common goals and there's, a process for how things should be done in a certain way. But it sounds like sometimes that can go to the extreme, as you've experienced in your career. So how do you recommend people who are leading in organizations, how would you recommend that they address these kind of red tape situations that probably when they were set up to begin with were meant to help the company grow and serve their customers better, but then ended up being restrictive and counteractive? What would you advise for people who are in those situations on how to influence the culture or influence the organization to change that or to do it differently?
Well, where we were at was at such an extreme that I think I can highlight, if you're in this situation, don't be.
Yeah.
Which is they had so many complaints from employees about the process that monthly the leadership would send out emails saying, the process may not be good, but this is our process. Stop complaining and follow it. And that is a level of deafness that is absolutely extraordinary. At one point, because I did a massive amount of international travel, and to the point that I'm having the company. You and I actually had lunch in Dulles Airport once while I was waiting to see if I could get a visa coming, because the company that I was working for failed to do the paperwork to submit things, but I wasn't allowed to do it on my own. And things got pushed so late that we were, I sat there waiting to see if someone was going to be able to drive out to Dulles at rush hour with a visa for me to travel to some international negotiations in Africa. It actually didn't happen. And so they wasted who knows how many thousands of dollars trying to follow a process that ended up upsetting the client that I was working for in the federal government. But there were a few times that I was able to point out kind of the cost of, hey, your red tape is making me go through these processes. I guess another great example, I've had a few injuries, as you also know, but I broke my ankle in a work soccer game and needed extra leg space. There was no way even the boot would fit in some leg space, the leg space I would get on an intercontinental flight to Australia. And so I needed to follow the medical process to get a medical exemption to fly, even economy plus, or a bulkhead or something. And so my doctor filled out the paperwork and somebody looked at it and said, well, there's a line on here that's not filled out. Send it back. And so he filled it out again. And on the line, he wrote, I didn't fill this out before because it's not relevant. And then they looked at it and like, well, this paper, we changed our form. and he hasn't put it on the most recent form. So he has his nurse fill it out, and she signs it on his behalf, and they reject it again because they said, well, it needs to be from your doctor. So he actually finally sends it back, and he wrote in red crayon, "Okay to fly." And then at that point, the medical doctor for the company starts taking a look at it, and he said, well, I used to be an Army doctor, and so we had to deal with, a lot of injuries and stuff, and I'm really concerned that if the plane flying over the Pacific Ocean going to Australia starts to crash and you have to jump out in a cast, and I have to say over and over, I'm not in a cast, I'm in a boot. If I absolutely have to, I can take this boot off and crawl. He's like, no, if you're in a cast, your cast could puncture the escape slide. And so I don't know if I can let you fly. So I'm going with that. And this is taking a lot of time as we're going back and forth, right? To the point that when they finally cleared me and bought my ticket, it was 6 days before I had to leave business class to go to Australia. I made $1,000 on one leg of that flight because it cost that much. If they had just bought the flight or talked to my doctor or anything in this process, it would have saved them thousands and thousands of dollars. But this was the process, and this is the way it goes. And there are no checks on a doctor saying, I'm not sure if you can jump out of a plane over the Pacific without puncturing the slide. And I'm sitting there going, if I'm jumping out of a plane out of the Pacific, honestly, a broken ankle is the least of my concerns. And it should be the least of yours too. So,
wow. That is like thinking about contingencies way to the extreme.
Yep.
Like, there's like a limit to contingency planning where at some point you're just like, really? We're going to, that's so fascinating. Yeah. So I love what you said there, that sometimes, like in your case, the best step is just to walk away and find something that's going to be a better fit. That's going to be the right fit. And what a great fit. Now you get to create this beautiful experience with your family and travel the world and take a break. And knowing you for as many years as I did, I know the level of work that you put into your career and how committed you were and how much burnout you experienced. So what have you noticed most? And this kind of ties into the Moxie method a little bit. We'll get there next, but I just would love to know, this is such a significant shift in your lifestyle from what you were doing a year ago, working 78 hours a week, sitting at a desk. And now you're basically creating your day and you get to explore the world and in a completely different way than what you were doing. What have you noticed shift the most since you've made this change?
I think my relationships with my girls have really changed. Harper wants to kill me most of the time because now I'm the one taking on the schooling role. Before it was my husband, and he and I have very different views on the value of education and learning. I don't know the best way to describe it, but he's kind of bought into the idea that kids will learn when and if they want to learn. And I'm still
very laissez-faire.
Yeah, and I'm still kind of the idea that we live in Tennessee and we see examples of that not being true all the time. We see some very, very educated people too. We're right by Oak Ridge National Lab, which is one of the top science labs in the country. We get PhDs, but Harper hates math, hates it with a passion, and would be more than happy to never have to learn how to add more than 2 digits if she could get away with it. And so I'm not seeing that she's going to develop some great passion later on to just become a math savant. So, I'm sort of trying to keep her not so much on grade level, because you could say all across the States, the grade level category is all over the place anyway, but just keep her going with some things that are critical life skills. We've found some amazing programs for them that I wouldn't have known about before that I think have been wonderful. I also discovered that, and I knew this, and you knew this too, I can't turn off my brain. And so...
No, it's impossible for you.
So I picked up some really interesting and strange projects that have opened a lot of doors for me in a way. I met in Ecuador, this Uber driver who is just working his tail off. He's up at 4 a.m. driving until 11. he'll take a nap in the middle of the day if he needs to, if he's getting tired, and he's sending all the money, or his kids still live nearby, but he and his wife are separated. So he's putting all the money towards their schooling and trying to get them as good as possible. And he's trying to practice English with everyone he picks up if they're English speaking, because he wants to get into this market of actually being able to have repeat clients. And Manta, Ecuador happens to be a cruise port. And so in talking to him and getting to know him, it was kind of, we started brainstorming saying, well, what if we try to line you up for cruise transport? Because there are a lot of people who just want to go places, but they don't want to join a bus. And so we just built him a little website and said, hey, this is Jose Luis. If you are on a cruise and you want to go anywhere, he's willing to take you some of these places. He's working on his English. Like, he wanted to be adamant about that. Don't make them think I speak it, but let them know I want to learn. And so it was maybe 2.5 hours to build this for him and put it out there and start making the right SEO connections for him, so that it started to pop up if people were looking for cruise activities in Manta. And he's been so happy. He's been able to get booked every time that the cruise has come in since the season started. And that's been really cool. And it's not something I would have had the chance to do beforehand. And I got to meet some of his regulars as he was, as we were setting this up, because he wanted testimonials and he wanted to make sure that I got them directly rather than him asking and them feeling compelled. He's like, if they say I'm a bad driver, I want you to know that. And so I had lunch with all these amazing American expats. I'm still in touch with a lot of them. So it's been kind of these cool ways that the universe has just manifested these really interesting experiences. Another one of those things has actually led to a pivot that I was really not expecting. Since I took on the educational burden for Harper, I was building using Notion to build a little dashboard for all of her school stuff. So I didn't have to keep showing her how to log in or where to find it, because learned helplessness is strong in that one. And so, I have this all set up, and I would build her projects if she's interested in things. Like, I don't know if your girls are into Epic right now, but mine really love musical. It's a homegrown musical about the Odyssey.
Oh, I'll have to tell Soph about it. I haven't even heard about it. She would love it. She's way into all that stuff.
Yeah. And
so that's cool.
They've been listening to it. So we built just a project about the Odyssey, chapter by chapter of a kid's translation, and kind of what's happening, what's going on, where in Greece or the Mediterranean was this taking place. Let's listen to the song, if there is one, and compare it to the story. And so trying to sort of build a little more depth on things where there's interest. And so I built all of that. And at one of the places we were at, we've discovered there's this whole culture of what's called worldschooling. And within the worldschooling, there are hubs. And they range from very, very rigorous on the schooling to just come and play and be around other kids who are also traveling the world. And the one in Portugal that we found was kind of more relaxed, but the kids would tend to work with their parents, do some schooling in the morning, and then go do activities in the afternoon. And Harper was out working by the pool and showed some other kids her little dashboard. And then the other parents started talking. So I have started kind of ad hoc building these dashboards and projects for other parents. They're like, hey, my kid's really interested in, the 7 Years' War, which I've actually never met a kid interested in the 7 Years' War. But that's what came to mind right now. But just building a kind of cross subjects project at their age level for them and adding it to these dashboards. And that's been kind of an interesting thing that I just never expected to pop up and just happened because I did it for my own kid and other people found value in it.
Yeah, I love that. It's like you're following the breadcrumbs.
Pretty much, yeah.
Amazing what breadcrumbs can lead us to. Yep. It's not like Little Red Riding Hood, who got eaten by the big bad wolf. No, is that the one?
Hansel and Gretel with the breadcrumbs.
Hansel and Gretel.
The birds eat the crumbs, but if you follow them fast enough, maybe you'll find them. Who knows?
Again, yeah. Thanks for helping me with my fairy tales. I was close, but anyway, you closed. You made it work. So you're following the breadcrumbs. So where are these breadcrumbs leading you next?
Well, so we're heading to Southeast Asia, and we found a traveling school that's starting up. And it's also another world school concept of bringing in people that want to take advantage of everything you can learn out in the world and couple it with, again, kind of natural learning. So integrating math into a field trip, let's say the 3/5 ratio or the Fibonacci sequence or golden ratio, all of those appear in nature. And so teaching those ratios to kids, showing them patterns, and then having them find them out in the world versus saying, hey, look at a sequence, memorize it, figure out what comes next, and then not explaining why we even care about sequences in a lot of ways, in a lot of places. So we're gonna see what that's like. This particular one that we found is just starting up. So we're really excited to try to help build and shape what that could become and fit it in for us. And I have been getting a couple more clients. So I'm trying to work on where to go with that, and we'll see.
So these are your clients that you're selling your Notion programs to, right?
Or just project based, like if they'll just ask for projects and I'll put something together, with one of them that I've had. I didn't think anyone would care, to be honest, but Harper was interested in architecture, and I think she's kind of burned out on it now that we're in Dubai. Honestly, she looks around everywhere. She's like, there's so much. But, I put together probably a 10, 15 page project about, hey, look at how environmental problems have been solved over time with architecture, how the Iranians would dig deep pits and then build a tall tower with a hole at the top so that wind would blow in, come down and cool the house. Or, look at how these cultures are using, they've calculated how much mud to put, how thick to make the walls to make it cave-like to keep a constant temperature, or how they're dealing with earthquakes by building. And we found a church in Argentina, Chile, in Santiago, that was built with Incan construction methods. And it's actually the only church that has survived all of the earthquakes in recorded history.
Wow.
And what they did was explained to us is they actually put the walls on top of a bed of pebbles. And so they can kind of roll. So the foundation is actually loose pebbles. And that keeps the tension in the walls from getting so great that they break. And so things that we've picked up on our travels and other things that I researched and learned, and just going through architectural issues, how people are solving them, putting in some projects that incorporate English and math, science. And so I've had several people ask for that, and just kind of whatever people are interested in. It augments some of the other stuff that we found that the girls are doing too.
Are you Mensa?
I've never applied.
Really? I think you might be Mensa. I've always wondered. You need to apply. I think you should apply and see if you're Mensa. I think you would. I'm sure you and your daughters and even Ben would probably all be Mensa. For listeners who don't know, Mensa is like it's like this group of extremely gifted people who have above normal IQs, right? Like you're like at Einstein level IQs. And I swear, Laura, you're Mensa. Like it's incredible.
My daughter's throwing Oreo cookies at me now as you say that.
So, okay, I think this is just like a really great example of you built your career. It's the beauty of the pivot, really. Like you built your career being an attorney, and now you've made this incredibly beautiful pivot, and you are clearly highly, highly intelligent, and you want to be using your brain in a creative way to create and build and do cool shit. So I think it's a great example of what happens when you just keep an open mind, follow the breadcrumbs, and trust yourself to kind of lead you in those new directions. And the confidence that can come when you do that, you can learn something for the first time when you're in your 40s, and you can master that skill, and people will find, there's a service, there's something a product that you can sell. That's really, really cool. How has that helped you with your confidence?
Well, that is a good question, because I have really struggled with confidence for a long time. In the legal field, there's this idea that your second year of law school, you're going to get the job that will keep you, that if you're going to a law firm, you're going to get a summer job at the law firm. And if you're worth hiring anywhere, they're going to bring you back. And so if you don't get hired your second year, that's a huge red flag to everyone in the law firm industry. Well, I was in a weird situation where the firm that I worked for wanted to bring me back. And I took a year after law school to clerk for a federal district judge. And so between my last year of law school and my clerkship year, the firm was bought out by a larger firm. And that firm just wanted the address in Tyson's Corner. They actually cut, I think they cut 2 or 3 attorneys out of 70, and they were definitely not hiring anybody new. And so on my resume, it looks like I was no offered my second year of law school. And so I'm coming out trying to apply, and I've got this federal clerkship, which is pretty prestigious. I've got, pretty high grades, but every single interview that I had, I was asked, why didn't you get an offer? And I'm trying to explain, and they're sitting there like, right. And I got rejection letters that are like, well, we noticed that you didn't get offered your second year of law school, so we're going to pass. And so I have this thing that's no fault of my own, other than picking that particular firm for the summer. And, it's this huge struggle. And so I really had a hard time trying to find a job coming out of the clerkship. And I think that sat with me for a really long time of kind of, if it was this hard to find a job, I've got to keep this one. And so I put up with some really, law firms aren't great in general for a work environment, but put up with some really not fantastic projects and environments and people, because if I lost that job, I was convinced I wasn't going to find another one. And that stayed with me a lot longer than it should have, I think. And so finally being in this place where I'm building something, and I didn't even set out to do anything with value. I was just doing something to make my life easier and help my kid. And then she's probably my most vocal cheerleader, because Harper, she has never met a stranger and needs to tell the world.
So true.
It's awesome.
She is a lover. That girl.
And so I have 2 really amazing cheerleaders. One of them is much more subtle and quiet, but you need those 2, because she's the one that'll give me a hug and just say, you're awesome after a rough day or something. And then I've got Harper going out like, look at this. And so that's actually what started all of this, was her sharing it, and other parents saying, well, could you do that for me? And realizing that, hey, there might be some value in that.
Yeah, I think Harper might have a career in marketing and sales in her future.
I think so too.
Yeah, you might want to look into that, because I think everybody everyone needs 4 types of people in their life. They need a cheerleader, they need a challenger, they need a coach. And oh my gosh, I totally lost the last one. Cheerleader, challenger, they need a coach, and a therapist. That's what I believe.
Yeah.
So it's great that you have 2 of those, and you have a challenger, because I know Ben, he's a challenger too. So, okay. I love this. So I'd love to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about the Moxie method. So there's 5 phases of the Moxie method. And I would love to know, you mentioned specifically earlier in the interview something about the last stage, which we call the shine stage, which is all about mentorship and giving back and lifting others as you go. I would love to hear your perspective on mentorship specifically, and what has your experience been like with mentorship in your life and in your career? And what do you think having a mentor means to you, or what's been your life experience with mentorship?
That is a fascinating question, and it's a hard one to answer in a really positive way. And I think part of that is because most of us don't know what a mentor is supposed to do. So I have been part of mentorship programs as a mentee and as a possible mentor. And I've really never gotten any value out of it whatsoever. At my last job, we were required to be mentors and mentees. And so I had assigned a mentor. I had a mentor assigned to me who I was actually really excited to get to know. And the response I got back was, I'm going to send you an email once a quarter, and we're going to say that I've met my responsibilities. I'm too busy. So, I'm not going to force a mentorship with that because there's nothing valuable that's going to come out of trying to force.
Right. Totally.
Now, I never actually got assigned a mentee. We all had to fill out our profiles and what we could offer. And I actually worked at a very science heavy place, but I was on the policy side of things. So kind of the soft stuff. And the position I had was incredibly unique. And there was nobody that really was following in that pathway. And so by having us just say, hey, pick me as your mentor based on what our work experience was, I think did a disservice in a lot of ways because nobody, I'm working with other scientists and they're going, well, what do I want a lawyer as a mentor for? And so there's no cross-pollination skills or really even looking at what you could get out of mentoring. A lot of people were just trying to find someone higher up in their chain that they thought could help, pull them up by their bootstraps or get them the right connections within their leadership. And I think there's a time and a place for that, but that's not, in my view, mentorship at all. Where I've really found the best mentors have been outside of work. I did have one colleague at work, a partner who took me under her wing on her own. And she was fantastic and probably taught me more about what the legal profession is, what it isn't, what it shouldn't be, what to tolerate, when to call bullshit, which is huge. I mean, it's absolutely huge. And being open to that was fantastic. But a lot of my other mentors are just people that I've run into in my lives in very different paths who are able to say, here's how I've done it. And here's what I've run into in my life. Does that translate at all to yours? And most of the time it does. And it's been incredibly helpful. So that's kind of my take on it. I love the idea. It hasn't particularly worked all that well for me, but when it has, I've been really excited and hung on to it as best as I could because it's partially therapist, partially challenger, partially coach, and occasionally cheerleader. So you get all four with the right mentor. And I think that's pretty fantastic.
Yes. You're not alone. Most of the people that I've talked to about mentorship and having a mentor, it's surprising how many have never had a mentor, especially a female mentor that they feel like really advocated for them and really helped support them in their career. And so you're not alone. I've heard this quite a bit, actually. I had a conversation with the woman a couple of weeks ago who was in her 50s. She had an incredible career. And she had just come back from a 4-month sabbatical, just like similar to what you've done. She quit her job and she had saved up enough money that she could take the risk of going on the sabbatical and come back knowing that she might not find a job right away, but it was still worth the risk for her to do it. So she's in her mid-50s. She's at the peak of her career. She quits her job and she takes this 4-month sabbatical. And I met her on the tail end of coming back from the sabbatical. And it was 3 months after she'd come back and thankfully she'd landed a job, which in this economy is, it was a gift. But I remember talking with her and sharing with her about this mentorship program that we're offering through Hello Moxie. And I was assuming that she would be the perfect mentor. And I was just like, you'd be so great. Would you love to be a mentor for our program? We're launching this new cohort in November. And she got quiet. She's like, yeah, I think I'd like that. And then she got really quiet. And then she said to me, Nicole, I've never really had a mentor. I think I'd really like a mentor. And I was just like, it was just like really a great mind-blowing moment for me to really kind of realize that everybody needs mentorship wherever you're at in your life, whatever life stage that you're at. We're all kind of craving to have like a trusted guide, someone who can be that coach, that therapist, cheerleader and challenger for us. So what's one of the coolest, most surprising, you mentioned that most of the mentorship you've had has been people outside of your career. So I'd love to know, what was the most surprising mentor that you've had that you weren't expecting them to be a mentor? What did they teach you?
So this one's actually pretty recent, but again, in Ecuador, I got scuba certified in college. I don't know if you remember, it was this weird one where it was required for PE to take a certain number of classes and scuba diving was one of them. But we had to do it in a geothermal vent in the mountains. So I was trying out to scuba certified, and which was
how interesting. I don't remember this. That's cool.
But so I've been certified for years, but after having kids, I didn't go much. And within the scuba community, things are always improving. And so if you haven't been in a certain amount of time, they want you to do a refresher. But it was, both of my girls were old enough to get certified. And so I just decided to do a recert instead of a refresher so I could do it with them. And because they were younger, we had to have a dive master as well as an instructor with us because of the rules for the number of certified divers or trainers or dive masters with young kids. And so I got to know this dive master in Ecuador who was from Arizona. She got divorced and went to Mexico and discovered scuba diving. And that had apparently been her life calling, even though she's now, 60. She's like, this is my thing. I love it. And so she's gone deep down this rabbit hole in the last couple of years, gotten certified as a dive master, is working towards instructor status, is in the water as often as she can get, is blogging about, native wildlife in and around Ecuador, and just wants to share the love of this diving community. And so got to talk to her and we just connected instantly. And she's been kind of this mentor that I wasn't expecting. She's like, look, I've been through all of this. I've owned all of these different companies. I've done these things. I've put up with who knows what as a woman in these environments that are generally male dominated. And I'm looking at you and I'm seeing that you're not as confident as you need to be. And I'm going to get you there. And I'm just sitting there like, wait, wow. I'm sitting on a boat with you to go in the water. She's like, yeah, but I want to bring out your awesomeness because I see it and I don't think you do. And I've never had anyone actually say it. Well, definitely not that bluntly, but even kind of obscurely or obtusely to say, I see you and I see what you're projecting and I see what you're allowing yourself to believe in yourself. And so a couple of days a week now, every day or every week, she checks in. She's like, all right, what awesome thing have you done today? And it's a hard thing to answer because you have to assume that anything you've done is awesome. And to be honest, I've definitely lived with imposter syndrome most of my life. This idea that, well, if I can do it, it can't be that hard, right? Because I could do it. So where's the challenge? But I've answered that every day for 5 months or every week, a couple of times, and started actually believing it. And I mentioned, hey, some people actually want this, these projects I'm making for Harper. She's like, of course they do, because they're amazing. I want the projects you're doing for Harper. And so I needed that cheerleader right now, I think, on my, and since she's retired, since she's pursuing her passion, she's in this mindset at the moment to be like, let's get everyone into a passion. And so that's been one of the better ones. I think maybe because I'm still in it right now and because it's so fulfilling. And then there's another one. I don't know. She wasn't a specific mentor to me, but I think in a way she was a mentor to the whole team. And that's when I mentioned I was kind of in a unicorn job situation. The office director that I had is a woman who I usually tell people is so accomplished that she doesn't even have an ego anymore. She was an Olympic competitor in martial arts. She was at the Olympic Training Center for school in Colorado because she was just that good at it, and then recognized at one point I should probably get a career. And so she got a degree in advanced biology, as one does. And then it's like, I don't know where I'm going to go with this. So then she got a master's in advanced chemistry. And then she became an expert in the nuclear field. But she didn't ever view anyone as a competitor. She was very much we can all do great things and we can all be great. And knowing that I have a great team means that we're all going to be stronger. And so there was no ego, there was no competition, there was no backstabbing, there was nothing but respect for everyone on the team. And I think that challenged a lot of people who had been in other work environments that came in because they were used to having to compete for recognition, for spotlights, for anything. And Dre's just sitting there going, all right, I have the best team, and here's what you did great this week. Here's what you did great this week. Here's how we've all grown together. Every single week, every staff meeting, there was about 10 minutes of telling us what we really needed to know from higher level staff meetings. And then it was about 30 minutes of celebrating people. At least that it was scheduled to be. It normally went to about 50 because people liked it. And by saying, let's see the good in all of us, let's see where we've all achieved, was a great mentorship thing for our whole team, I think.
What did you notice that was the most different about that culture, like in terms of how people interacted with each other outside of the meeting versus cultures you've been in where it was the opposite? How were people engaging after those meetings?
I think people were more free in sharing information than any other team I've been on, because no one was being recognized. I mean, so we were all being celebrated, but it was kind of within the context of the team. It wasn't, hey, Nicole wrote an amazing paper and I can't wait to see what she does again. It was, Nicole contributed this beautiful paper that was able to help this part of our team and this part of our team and this part of our team to really do its mission. And so I want to highlight the great work that helped us grow. It was always very focused on that helped us as a team grow. And so everyone was willing to actually share information, to talk and collaborate, because doing something that put anyone else down wasn't, if they wanted the notice and the recognition, if that's why they were out there, that wasn't how they were going to get it. But I never felt like that was in the motivation. I think it just made people feel good. And
people liked.
Yeah.
People underestimate the power of like just someone appreciating you, just saying thank you.
Yep.
Like you just really can't say it enough. I mean, there's, I believe you can never say thank you enough. So those are such really wonderful, wonderful examples. Well, first of all, I'm so happy to hear that this experience you've had with this mentor has helped you with your confidence and overcome imposter syndrome, because it's absolutely true. I've known you for so much of your life that you're so incredibly talented. And the only thing that really is holding you back is, and I believe this is true for anyone, is what you believe about yourself and what you're capable of. Yeah. And you're capable, like you're absolutely, no question, hands down, capable of so much, because I just know you. So that's really, really incredible. And and it's really powerful to see even the way that you talk about the projects that you've been working on with such joy and confidence, is a testament to how she supported you in that way. That's really cool. What do you think you want your legacy to be?
Pithily, I would love it to be, she wasn't an asshole. I mean, I want to be there. Genuinely, like I want to be there. I want to support people, to build them up, and just, one of the big things that I'm really focusing on, though I don't have to work hard on it, to be honest, because I think all of our kids are amazing, but is see value everywhere you are, in everyone, even if or especially if they're driving you crazy. And everywhere we've been in the world, just pointing out different cultures and look for new things that help expand your worldview. Like, how are they doing these things differently or better? Or, how does this change your insight and make you more sympathetic or empathetic if you can reach that level? So I would love my legacy to be that I was not an asshole, that I was encouraging and building up. The other thing, and this has been a bigger struggle, but I have been working on trying to write a novel, and I would love to just have that out there and have it be something that someone wants to read, I guess. So
that's beautiful. And having read part of, I don't know if this, I know you, I think you're reading 2 novels, right?
Yeah.
Like, aren't you?
Yeah.
So cool. And having read your writing, I mean, it'll be so exciting when you actually get to publish it. That's very, very going to be very rewarding.
Oh, thank you.
Very cool. Who's a woman in history that you just like massively inspired by?
So I've got a bunch, but the one right now is Abigail Adams. I'm
Ooh.
teaching, or the online high school that my oldest is at is fantastic, but it does have some limitations. And one of the things that it doesn't do is offer AP classes. And so she's been wanting to sit for some of the AP exams, and seeing as how we kind of put her in that situation, I want to make sure she's supported. So AP US History and AP Gov are things that I know pretty well. So I'm building the review materials and becoming her teacher for that. And so I've been reading a lot of Abigail Adams recently and putting all of that together. But the fact that she's sitting there, writing to her husband saying, hey, so while you guys are building this new government, don't forget the ladies. And he laughs at her. He literally laughs at her. He's like, you're so cute, in his letter back. And the fact that she didn't kill him, first off, is huge. But just she kept going. And even as he didn't ever take her seriously in that front, she kept kind of finding ways to increase the awareness and visibility of women, and just plan B, plan C, plan D of, okay, well, we didn't get a vote, but maybe we can have a voice here, or maybe we can have a voice here, or now I'm part of the Daughters of Liberty and you guys have the Sons of Liberty, that your cousin Sam is running. Give us some visibility. And he respected, John Adams respected her enough on that front that he did. But the role and the value of the Daughters of Liberty, I think, is something that, at least when I was in high school and they were rushing through everything to satisfy a test, wasn't anything we really learned about. And
yeah, what is the Daughters of Liberty?
So it was a homespun organization that came up during some of the taxation disputes. And it was women who were making a lot of the purchasing decisions because their men were gone fighting in the 7 Years' War or whatever else that had come before this, who were saying, we're going to boycott. And yeah, there's not a lot of product here that we can buy. So we're going to figure out how to make homespun. We're going to sit in the park. They had demonstrations where they would go into public parks with looms and just make textiles and give them away to people who could sew clothing. If they couldn't afford to buy new clothing, they didn't want to wear their British made stuff, they were like, here, take this. We want to make it as feasible as possible for any colonist to boycott British goods as we can. And so they started sharing recipes. They started sharing knowledge. Someone would say, hey, I know how to make candles. And they might make some candles that weren't British and share them with the community. Martha Washington was also a big Daughter of Liberty. And so it was just this really visible way for women to help drive the boycotts. And they probably did a lot more than some of the political rhetoric did in terms of having an impact. The Stamp Act, for example, was repealed because British merchants said, hey, we can't sell any paper. And part of that was these boycotts. They had classes on how to make paper. Now,
interesting.
Granted, the British rule was you could use paper, but it had to be pre-stamped in Britain before it was sent over. So it wasn't a question of in theory, you couldn't get paper somewhere. It was just that they were requiring a specific process, but just to avoid any type of smuggling or black market of getting paper from the Caribbean, if that was a possibility, though they were also subject to the Stamp Act. These women are like, let's just make our own. And that way the British might not see it. They might not know it. We're going to make our own stuff and make this boycott actually possible.
I love that. I like the power of grassroots.
Yep.
And that sometimes it's just starting with these really small, everyday things without having to go take this top-down approach, but just making a difference at a local, smaller level and having it. That's really powerful. Okay, I have a question for you, though. A lot of people would argue today that, women's rights have come a long way, and that now, because of all the advances that have been made with women's rights, that men are suffering. And we're seeing for example, more women are in higher education now than men, and they're performing better than men are. What would you say to someone who says that, well, men are now losing because women have made so many advances. Like, do you think there's more room for women to go when it comes to women's rights? And how would you respond to that?
So there's a very famous quote from Sandra Day O'Connor, who was the first woman on the Supreme Court when she was appointed, which is, how many more women, do you think we need to have on the Supreme Court? She said, I'll be happy when there are 9. And the response back was kind of, well, what do you mean? How dare you think that there should be 9 women on the Supreme Court? And she said, well, nobody cared that there were 9 men on the Supreme Court forever. And I don't think that she was ever specifically or strongly advocating for getting rid of all the men. I've heard some people say, oh, she's horrible because of that. And to me, that was definitely not the point. I don't think it was the point either. But I think in a way it was kind of, this isn't a win-lose discussion. And it's been paired or pitched that way so often. And I think it's partially to create divisions that don't need to be there. In the fields that I've worked in, I've generally worked in energy and engineering, in the legal area, science. It is still very male dominated. So I can't say that I've had personal experience in seeing an overrun of women. So,
they say the wave is coming, Laura. The wave is coming.
It might be. It just hasn't hit where I'm at yet.
I feel you. I feel you the same way. I've been in manufacturing and B2B e-commerce, severely male dominated industries. So yeah.
I know that a lot of people feel like, I've heard the backlash on DEI, and male resumes aren't getting looked at all, because they want to have unqualified women or other people, so that's why we're not being appreciated. One of the things that I always did when I was responsible for hiring was I actually had just make sure that I didn't even have a bias. I had my admin strip out the names and put numbers on the resumes. And occasionally, if there were specific gendered things, like a large women's aid organization or something, I would ask them to just change it to be a generic and not give the name, but say a global aid organization for their extracurriculars or something. And that way, as we were all looking at the resumes, nobody had any tip or any clue. And it was always interesting to see that once the names were attributed, people in my hiring groups were really, really surprised about who they had picked, because they would have picked somebody different based on. They didn't say based on the name, but it's like, well, now that I look at John's resume, I think it's really strong. It's like, you didn't like John. John was ranked 8 out of 8. You liked Mary, you liked Susan.
Interesting.
And the other thing that I've found again in hiring is, maybe it's just the people that, I'm sure it's definitely just the people I've run into in the sense that I'm in these kind of unique niches, is I'm not focused on what people have done on a piece of paper as much as what they show me they can and are willing to do in the future. And so a lot of my questions will be getting at the question of how do you learn? How do you solve a problem? How do you deal with not having enough information? And so one of the questions that I was asked in an interview that I've run with ever since is, if you had 3 to 4 words to name your autobiography, what would it be? And I don't actually care about the answer anymore, because I would say that 95% of the people that I've asked that question to don't even try to answer it. I get, well, that's really hard. Yeah, I don't know. Let's move on. And to me, that says a lot. And so, I'm looking at, and I do have a point on the gender question here, is I'm looking at who's even willing to answer that question. They might say, I shop at Prada. Great. That's wonderful. That gives me some insight. And you're willing to think. You're willing to try to answer this weird question and maybe all these people are overthinking and saying, well, what do I say that's not going to get me fired? But by saying nothing, that tells me even more, I think. And so I've said 95% of the people don't answer that question. I've never had a single man give me an answer. And so
Wow.
I don't know what that's actually saying in terms of women getting ahead or gender bias, but based on what I'm looking for is in someone who's willing to learn, who has given the time to try to understand an industry or even a deep passion, might have written a book on their own about something, or can give me a step-by-step on how they would problem solve through something hard. That's who I'm going to be drawn towards. And it has nothing to do with gender whatsoever. And if it just so happens that it stacks up more and more women, then I think as a society, we should start looking at what skills are being brought to the table that are valuable and how to spread that across everybody, not look at men aren't getting hired, women aren't getting hired per se. But again, I'm in a unique area, a very, very niche area.
I think it's interesting to me because I think there's a power dynamic there that I think is fascinating to me. Like, I wonder if the fact that men, let's be real, there's a power dynamic. Physically, men are stronger than women. It's been like that forever, right? So I wonder if there's something there about, like, when you are in a position of power, something about that makes you less likely to, I don't know, think creatively or flexibly, because you already have this position of power. So you don't necessarily need to as much, potentially. I don't know. It's just a theory.
Maybe. I don't know.
But I wonder. But anyway, that's really fascinating. So I love this idea of it not being a win-lose situation, because I think that's very, very true. And I love that story that you shared about Sandra Day O'Connor. It's really, really cool. Man, so much good stuff, Laura. So, okay. So my next question for you is, I think what's really come through in this interview to me is just the level of curiosity that you have and how much you value having a curious, open mind and really exploring, wherever you're at, and just being open-minded to what's in front of you, and the power that curiosity has to lead you in exciting new pathways, rather than being stuck in the status quo. So I think that's really cool. What advice would you have for anyone who might be looking for a mentor or struggling to find their next step? What do you think it takes to be a really great mentor?
Well, seeing as how I've never been anyone's mentor, I haven't had any feedback on my ideas. So take this all with a grain of salt. But I would say that for someone who's struggling and looking for a mentor or with their next step, particularly if you're struggling with your next step, look for a mentor that is not in one of the pathways that you think are kind of foreordained for you. And for example, with law firms, it was really interesting. When I first joined, it was right before the 2008 economic crisis, and the partnership pathway was very, very clear for almost all firms. It was kind of people come on, and then 6 to 7 years they'll make a partner. And so that was kind of the promise that was laid out to a lot of us coming out of school. And then the economy just tanks in 2008, and all of a sudden it's a 15-year pathway to partnership. And that's a doubling, at least, of what we had been told our pathway was. And so a lot of people are sitting there going, what am I going to do? And there is the kind of age-old complaint of where the baby boomers are acknowledged as the first generation that really isn't stepping back from a lot of their roles and opening up positions in a way that previous generations had done for future generations. And so this path to partnership is getting prolonged. The existing partners are actually suing their firms over age limit requirements that would require them to step back and leave the company so that they can stay longer. These law firms are getting top heavy. And so a lot of my friends, their mentors were some of these partners that aren't stepping down. And that was all that they were looking at. It was, what are the steps that I need to take to do this thing that keeps getting yanked out from me, like Lucy in the football. And so when they weren't accepted as partner after 15 years at the same company, they had no idea what else they might be able to do. a lot of them just jumped to other firms where they had to restart, not for a full 15 years, but they went into a lower position than what I think that they were qualified for. I think they would have been far better assets to everyone if they had the confidence in their abilities that they never got to see, in part because, their mentor is somewhat self-interested as well in keeping them subordinate. So being able to look outside of your path for a mentor, you're talking to someone who can look at what you're looking at in a whole different lens. And so we all see it like, this is what I know, this is my path. If you find someone outside of that, they're like, well, yeah, but tear down this wall. What about all of these things over here? Or have you considered that maybe these 10 steps aren't the best thing for you? And it really gives you a chance to actually look at what you're doing and what you may want with a mindset that's broader than what you had before you found your mentor.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. At least I've seen when it comes to being a newcomer, moving into a new field, I've definitely seen that like having that outside perspective when you're looking on something with a fresh angle is really powerful. I mean, I remember when I first started working in the B2B e-commerce space, I was completely new to the industry. And there's like, if you're in B2B e-commerce, there's like no women. Okay.
Yeah.
And I remember like being asked to speak at this conference about my experience with change management and digital transformation. And I remember thinking like, why are they asking me to speak about this? Like, obviously I had helped this company digitally transform, but I'm like, this is a no-brainer. Like in my mind, I'm thinking like, why? And then I go to this event and I realize nobody was talking about this. Nobody was paying attention to it. Everyone was talking about all of like the technical aspects of how to build XYZ product or service, but nobody was talking about actually the people part of it and the problem with getting people on board and addressing the change challenges across an organization. And I realized like, there's so much value in being the outsider and being able to look at something with fresh eyes and see it from a completely different perspective that can really shift kind of like the groupthink that happens with when people are all kind of in the same bus and going in the same direction they don't really see.
Right.
So I really love that challenge for mentorship as something to think about more holistically, more broadly than just like this narrow who can mentor me that's in the same pathway as me.
Now, there's a lot of value in that too, but I think it depends on what you're looking for. And so I know this goes without saying, but I'm still going to say it. There's nothing wrong with having multiple mentors. So, finding one that can help you on this path or help with problems you're dealing with in a specific area where their insight is actually targeted enough to be useful is probably just as valuable at certain times as somebody outside.
Yeah. And even like peer mentorship is huge.
Yeah.
There's actually research showing that just a peer mentorship can actually be more impactful in some cases than top-down mentorship. I was just talking with a colleague of mine the other day who has just this beautiful career. I mean, she's such a, wonderful woman. And she's a mentor for Hello Moxie. And I was talking with her and I was sharing with her just what a gift she was going to be to the mentors that are going to be joining our cohort in a couple of months. And she turned to me and she said, oh my gosh, I'm looking forward to this because I know that I'm going to learn so much from them. And I just love that attitude and that mindset. And I think that's one of the reasons why she's a great mentor is because there's like this open-mindedness and this humility that you can learn from anyone, anywhere, and that everyone around us has value in teaching us and helping us along the way, which is exactly what you've shared today with your experience with your mentors. So, man, Laura, thanks for coming on the show today.
Of course, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Joy to host you. And I'm so excited to see. So where are you going next? Tell our listeners, where's your next stop?
We are headed to Singapore, and then we're going to jump around Southeast Asia with a traveling school that will set up in Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam. And we're going to travel with the teachers, with the families. And I think I hope I'm not getting this mixed up. If anyone's listening and cares and wants me to fact check, I totally can. But I think that the first stop, the focus is going to be on coral reefs, the health of coral reefs, and ocean sustainability and working alongside some people running an elephant sanctuary. And then they're also inviting in a builder who's an expert with bamboo architecture so that the kids can kind of learn how sustainable building works and learn some architectural structures. And then when we go to Indonesia, it will also really, really focus on marine health and the science of helping to protect and improve the environment.
Thanks for listening to the Hello Moxie podcast. If today's story sparks something in you, share it with another woman who's ready to rise. Learn more about our community by visiting hellomoxie.us and discover how the Moxie method can help you reclaim your voice and lead with impact. See you next time.